Joining us. It is 7:03 p.m. here in Warsaw, Poland, and we're a few minutes late, but we waited for our esteemed guest, Usama Darkwing Duck, to join us. And so we're all here. Hopefully, we have no gremlins today, like we did yesterday, where we had to restart the show 5 times because of YouTube glitches or mass reporting and so on, because of an uncomfortable topic. But yeah, I think today will go well. So I have JC, I have Odon, I have Paul, and of course, we've said Usama. So yeah, Odon, what are we discussing today? And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Today it will be the conclusion of our series on the Jerusalem thesis, and we will look at some historical evidence that seem to connect the Quranic text with actual events that happened in Jerusalem, and we will wrap up our whole series then.
All right, that's a pity, but I'm sure we have more in the works that we can discuss. I've got some things that might be an interesting continuation, various topics to explore. We can all do as a panel because it's great having panels like this. Lots of great input. I mean, everyone always says we're a great team, except for me. I hope over time to change that perception. All right. All right. Yeah. Anyone got something to add? I think last week was a banger of a show, Odon. You really laid it out hard. Clearly, the standard narrative is false. Any thoughts from anyone else?
Oh.
I'll basically just add that yes, it's been a phenomenal series, and I'm sure that Odon and also Paul could actually speak about this topic for days on end. Odon has done a wonderful job at keeping it very concise and on different topics, so that he didn't have to jump from topic to topic, but yes, tackling one thing at a time. So I think everything that we have seen is quite clearly not Mecca, and everything seems to be pointing at Jerusalem. So I'm looking forward to this concluding show.
Yeah. By the way, yesterday I did a show with JC and Usama, and then Adam Sika, some guy called Adam Sika, jumped on the show as well, and then Thunderous One also jumped on. We were discussing the origins of the narratives in the Quran, the false stories, and I was going through not a detailed level, but I prepared slides on the stories in the Quran and the original source, and many of them are traced to obviously the Midrash, the Talmud, Jewish myths, children's stories, or Gnostic legends, and I traced the sources of all of these stories. We were going through them, not very deeply, like I said, but at introductory level. But the stream was interrupted 4 times. We had to stop the stream because we were cut off, and this only happens with mass reporting, and we were cut off 4 times, had to restart the stream. We finally managed to stream the 5th time. So it looks like people really are not happy, and that's what we were discussing as a panel, to go through the origins of these stories and discuss the issues we have there.
It might have been a malign jinn, of course.
Allah works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be Allah. It would be a mischievous jinn or genie.
Yeah. And the best news is we smashed Allah and we got it done.
Smash Allah, smash Allah. All ham to Allah.
Alhamdulillah.
And Allah knows BS.
Yes.
Hey, I learned about BS. I did not know. See, I'm Egyptian. We do not speak like letters of word. So I learned about BS. I did not know what it is. It's a new expression. BS.
So yeah. So guys, shall we begin? Yeah. Here we are.
Here we are. If I remember well, last time we spoke about the sacred geography of Jerusalem and Mecca, Safa, Marwa, and so on, the pilgrimage, the Hajj, the Umrah. We spoke about the night journey also. And now we will speak about what I think are historical accounts within the Quran of actual historical events that happened in Jerusalem. Especially, we will look at this excerpt from Surah 48, the victory, where there is a narrative relating to an expulsion of the believers from Masjid al-Haram. And we already established that Masjid al-Haram could very well be, and actually is, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So there is this story in the Quran. According to the Islamic narrative, it refers to an attempt to conquer Mecca from the partisans of Muhammad. They went to Mecca and they were expelled there. There was a sort of a brawl and they didn't fight, and Mecca was not conquered. But when we look at the text, it could very well refer to Jerusalem rather than Mecca. So I've accepted the verses 20 to 28. They start like, God has promised you much booty that you will take in the future. He has hastened for you this victory, and withheld the hands of people from you, that it may be a sign for the believers, and that he may guide you to a straight path. He promises over victories that you were so far unable to realize, which God has already encompassed. And ever is God over all things competent. And if those who disbelieve, I think those are literally the Jews, not the miscreants nor the infidels, but they are the one who have covered their sacred scriptures with the Talmud. So there were no Jews in Mecca, but there were Jews at a time in Jerusalem. I will explain. If those who disbelieve that fought you, they would have turned their back in flight, then they would not find a protector or helper. This is the established way of God, which has occurred before, and never will you find in the way of God any change. And it is He who withheld their hands from you and your hands from them. So here there is this expression, bibatni makata. It is, according to the Islamic narrative, it means in Mecca, in the valley of Mecca. But it can be translated otherwise. After it caused you to overcome them, and ever is God of what you do, seeing. They are the ones who disbelieved and obstructed you from Al-Masjid al-Haram, while the offering was prevented from reaching its place of sacrifice. Well, I won't read everything, but the important part is what I already explained. We see here that there is a group of believers that are about to enter or to come to the Temple Mount, to Masjid al-Haram. And they are prepared. They have got offering. If we see here in verse 35 that they had offerings. The offerings are described in I think in the same surah as being cattle adorned with garlands. They are beasts ready to be sacrificed. So if we think of a Jewish context here, having beasts prepared for sacrifice on the Temple Mount, it's something very very important in a Jewish mind. Remember that the temple was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans, and thereafter, in the centuries, a Christian power ruled over Jerusalem, and the Jews were forbidden to enter or to come to the Temple Mount. And at the time, then came a time then the Jews were also forbidden to enter Jerusalem completely. which is one of the reasons, I think, for the expression Masjid al-Haram. There is Masjid al-Haram means the sacred mosque, according to the Islamic narrative, but it can be also understood as the sacred place that is forbidden, the place of prostration that is forbidden. And we already discussed it. It can be forbidden because the whole of Jerusalem, and especially the Temple Mount, is forbidden to the Jews. And it can also be understood as being forbidden because it is also the place of the Holy of Holies. And no Jews is allowed to step into the holies or the Holy of Holies, but the high priest once a year. So here, if we understand that Masjid al-Haram is the temple, we have this relation of an episode that occurred at a moment where Jews were able to expel the believers from the Temple Mount. So the question to be asked is, when did Jews rule over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem? In the 7th century. And there was one time during the Byzantine-Persian War when Jews had the upper hand in Jerusalem. Around 614, there was an attempt, a conquest, an attempt to conquer Jerusalem from the Persian. And we know from the Jewish tradition and from the chronicles of the time that the Persian had with them an army of Jews from Babylon. Let's remember that Persia was an empire, which means a kingdom of kingdoms. And there was a Jewish kingdom within Persia, with a Jewish king who was naturally subservient to the emperor, to the king of kings. And I think he had an influence in persuading the Persians to conquer Jerusalem and to let the Jews have it back. And this is what happened. In 614, Jerusalem was conquered by Persians, by Jews from Babylon, and also by many other Jews from the Levant who revolted against the Byzantine rule. And let's also remember that the Persians had Arab auxiliary troops. So my hypothesis here is that in this composite troop that conquered Jerusalem, there were Persians, there were Jews, there were Arabs, and there were Arabs that were led by Nazarene Jews, and they had the objective of accessing the Temple Mount and having some rites made there, namely sacrifices that could have hastened the return of the Messiah and the triggering of the Messianic times. And what we see here in this passage is the relation of this attempt. A troop of Arabs led by Nazarene Jews tried to access the Temple Mount with cattle, with beasts ready for sacrifice, but they were forbidden to do so by other Jews, the one who ruled over Jerusalem at the time, because they also wanted access to the Temple Mount. And let's not forget that Messianic Jews, Jews who believed Jesus was the Messiah, were opposed to other Jews, especially rabbinic Jews. They were strongly opposed to them. And this opposition led here to a battle, a sort of battle, and the believers, the Arabs led by the Jewish Nazarenes, were expulsed from the Temple Mount. So here, if we understand this passage this way, we have to consider the expression bibatni makata. It is very important for our thesis because it is the only occurrence within the Quran of the word Mecca. So it's an apax legomenon, a word that can mean anything since we have only one occurrence of it. So according to the narrative, an Islamic narrative, it means Mecca. Bibatni Mecca means in the belly of Mecca, so in the valley or in the hollow of Mecca. But if we look at the Razm, and if we take the context, if we have the whole context in mind, the context of this episode happening in Jerusalem near the Temple Mount, near Masjid al-Haram, we are forced to understand that Makkata doesn't mean Mecca here. It could mean something else. So I've asked Arab friends and Arab scholars about it. One of them told me that Bibatni Makkata could be understood otherwise. One would have to assume that Makkata is not very. There is something wrong with the word. It's not Makkata. It's Makkah or Makkah, but not Makkata, and certainly not Makkata with two Ks. According to him, Bibatni Makkata could mean in the heart of the battle or in the heart of the fury. He told me about an Arabic verb with the letter mim and ka in it that could refer to this idea of a battle or fury. And so it wouldn't mean Makkah at all. Yeah, might be. I could go with this. What I want to point out here is that since it is the only expression of Makkah, the word Makkah in the Quran, the traditionists who fabricated the Islamic narrative could very well have chosen this word to be the name of the holy city, Mecca, they were creating, because it fit the text. And it also fits ancient traditions, ancient Arab traditions. There were traditions about sanctuaries or places named Mecca or Makkeh. Especially, there was a place in Syria which is named in the Bible as Abil Beit Makkah. Makkah was a biblical character, I think a queen. There is this thing. We have also sources that tells us that the Arabs had a sanctuary supposedly named Mecca, but not in the Hijaz, but in Paran, so in the north, in northern Arabia. So there was something about Mecca that might have interested or that might have triggered the traditionists who invented this idea of an Islamic city in the desert of Arabia. And so they chose the word Mecca as the name for their city because of this verse and because it appealed to them, to their history, to the ancient knowledge of Mecca characters and so on. So this is my take on this passage as referring to the actual conquest of Jerusalem that happened in 614. What do you think of this?
Yeah, if I may add a couple of things. First, an observation. So Surah 48 has 29 verses. So the very last one in that surah, it mentions Muhammad by name, which only appears 4 times, of course. But it says, interestingly enough, those who follow him, their likeness is in the Torah and the Injil. And then it goes on to speak in very Christological terms. So I think there are two logical options for this surah. One is that it is grossly mistranslated, and it was something to do with the apostles and saying that their likeness is in the Torah and the Injil. So, well, there were Jews who met Christ and they started the movement. And if it is Judeo-Nazarenes, and we're talking about people in the 7th century as well doing stuff, and there were Jews who accepted the Messiah, still you would understand that their likeness being in the Torah and the Injil makes sense. But it doesn't make sense if we think about it in terms of Islam, when they say that the Torah and the Injil are corrupt and all of those things. So I think whether it was meant to be an ancient history about the apostles, it would be Jerusalem. And if it is about a recent event of the conquest of Jerusalem, it would still be Jerusalem. And I think Mecca doesn't really fit at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of something. This surah has been tampered with. The last verse, verse 29, is blatantly an interpolation. It's a very long verse, starting with Muhammad is the messenger of God, and those with him as for. It's a very Islamic verse with the one of the only 4 occurrences of Muhammad. It has been shown and demonstrated that it is an interpolation, and we also have a physical evidence for it. There is a photo of a manuscript that has been taken by Gerd Puin and his team at the end of the 1970s, where they were called in Sana'a in Yemen to study the stash of ancient manuscript that was discovered in the Grand Mosque of Sana'a. And there is a photo of a Sana'a manuscript. So it's not the famous palimpsest, it's another manuscript. This photo was published in around 2000 in UNESCO CD-ROM. It was the style of the time, this time, the CD-ROM, and it has disappeared ever since. I have a copy of the photo, but I don't have the exact reference. And on this photo, on this picture, you see a manuscript of Surah 48 that is missing the last verses. I think the verse 21 or 22 to 29 are missing. And the first verses of Surah 49 are missing also. You see the manuscript, instead of having the whole of Surah 48 and the beginning of Surah 49, it ends at verse 20 or 21 in Surah 48 and starts on the same level with Surah 9 verse 10, Surah 49 verse 10. So it's evidence that at least in one of the Quranic collections, the verse with the Muhammad occurrence was absent, and even the verse with the Bibatni Makata, the mention of Mecca, was absent. But it's an enormous, huge evidence, but it's very, very hard to come by, because the Yemeni authorities have withdrawn the UNESCO CD-ROM, and it's nowhere to be found. But
wow.
It's an interesting
anecdote. Evidence found and then lost. Well, that's news in Islam. It's never happened, right, Lloyd?
Yeah.
It's never happened. I mean, it's not like they've destroyed artifacts. It's not like they've built a building on top of Muhammad's house so that they completely erased his house from existence in Mecca and built a library on top of it or something, that they've paved over the Kaaba where 300 prophets are buried, that the Hatam where Ishmael and his mother is within 2 meters of the Kaaba wall itself, and they've never shown the bones, they've never shown any scans. It's crazy. All
Look,
that artifacts like rocks with inscriptions disappear. No.
Islam, listen, brother. Islam promote knowledge. We need the library so the Muslim can have access to knowledge. Islam start with the word iqra, read. And to read, you have to have a book. And the book need a library. That's why we build the library over the tomb of Prophet Muhammad, because he understand how important to have knowledge. That's the whole idea. It's not like we're trying to hide something or, move something. No. Knowledge. You got it? Easy.
Yeah.
Lloyd,
sorry.
let me just show you the picture I was referring to. So this is what I've got. Do you see it? No, you don't.
Yeah, you just removed it.
What's wrong with yeah? All right. And do you see it? No.
Give me a second. There you go.
Here it is. So this is the picture I was talking you about. You see, it ends here with Surah 48, verse 23, and it starts here with Surah 49, verse 12. So the verse 24 with Bibatni Makata is missing, as well as the verse 29 with the Muhammad occurrence. But it's very hard to, and I asked many people, and no one could provide me with a reference for this picture, and the manuscript it is taken from. The only thing I have is this. But it's evident that this Surah 48 has been changed, tempered, tainted. I don't know.
Wow.
Okay.
Actually, this sounds like the sort of thing that maybe one day we should just bring this up, and then Usama can go through it and read it live and see if we find any more problems. No?
Brother, you can't read that.
No, it's unreadable.
Hey,
you need a better picture.
Can you make it, yeah, brother, can you make it a little bit bigger? Give
Zoom
me
in?
just one of these. Make it
No,
bigger. I can't.
We need a higher definition.
Just zoom in, though. Zoom in.
MashaAllah. That's not Arabic. That's French. You want to live from here? Here it is. Read it. No, it's weird original Arabic. I don't see any vowels. I don't see any dots. It's well, good luck.
But in the future, like JC said, we might get some surprises. We might have, for example, a full disclosure of the pictures that that were taken in Yemen during the Gert Queen mission there. They haven't been published. They haven't been published yet. They are kept within the Saar University in Saarbrück in Germany. But this might change the same way that the pictures from the Anton Spitaler, the German Islamologist who died in the 1990s, I think, were eventually finally published by his pupil. What's her name? She's a German specialist of the Quran, and this was the basis for the Corpus Quranicum project. No, this doesn't ring a bell. All right. Okay. Let me go back to the presentation. Is this it? Yeah. Okay.
It seemed to me while you work on that, Odin, it seemed to me the forbidden mosque, as you just said, had have to be the temple in Jerusalem. I don't see where can we make this Kaaba or the surrounding area of the Kaaba in Mecca to be forbidden, because I mean, for Muhammad's life, between the age of none until the age of 53, or 53, as Muslims claim, you see people going around the Kaaba. You see women circling the Kaaba naked with men.
Yeah.
I mean, how can this be forbidden when in reality everybody can get there? Everybody is loaded with all these false gods according to their narratives. I mean, we're not saying we claim it to be. They said it. That's what it is. So forbidden, you're not going to be able to get there. It's a secret. It's a holy. It is Jerusalem. It is a temple, the Solomon temple, not Mecca. It cannot be. So it seemed to me they made up the story. They made up the story of Muhammad and this Islamic narrative, and then they found a place for it. Let's put it in Mecca. It does not fit there. It does not fit there. Period. I mean, I could not just this and everything else. I mean, I wish I had more knowledge about that, but that's what I know.
But we can draw the same conclusion from the rest of our study. Last week, we saw that the Masjid al-Haram was the place of Abraham, that it was also the place of the Hajj and Umrah, that it was the place of Safa and Marwa.
Sure. And all
if
that.
you put it this way, it can only be in Jerusalem. It can only be the Temple Mount. So the
if we can just go back, Odon, to the traditional narrative. This is an episode where the traditional narrative, the story of Muhammad, really makes no sense at all. The three major problems that I would point out. One is it talks about that they would say that what was that, Bibatna might mean a valley, so it's often referred to as the Valley of Mecca, and the story is that Muhammad was coming down with all his followers to make the pilgrimage to the Hajj to the Kaaba in Mecca, and the Meccans, the Quraysh, came out and met him halfway, or not halfway, but they met him in this valley, which was the valley of Hudaybiyah, and they had a standoff, and Uthman went to negotiate with Abu Sufyan, who incidentally was his relative, it was his cousin, which you might think is rather strange, but okay, they're all related to each other, the complex family tree. But it's rather strange they have the cousin of your enemy as your negotiator. So you've got that situation. First problem is, why would they call it the Valley of Mecca? Because surely they would call it the Valley of Hudaybiyah, if that's the valley where this encounter took place. The whole point of the story, or the thrust of the story, is it didn't take place at Mecca. It took place at somewhere else, and the narrative provides a name, because Mecca's not really, I don't think Mecca's really in a valley. It's in a lowland area, but it's not, it wouldn't be many people's idea of a valley, because the mountains are some distance away. It's just a lowland area between several mountains. But whether I'm right or wrong about that, how you define a valley, it's not the Valley of Hudaybiyah. Would have to be somewhere else with a different name. And it's strange that the only time in which Mecca is allegedly mentioned in the Quran is not actually a reference to Mecca at all. It's a reference to somewhere else that somehow got the name Mecca for a reason that's never adequately explained. A second part of a second problem I have with the narrative is verse 10, which I don't think you've included here, of Surah Al-Fat. And verse 10 says, talks about the believers taking an oath. And the narrative says, oh, yes, this is because when Uthman didn't return from his negotiations promptly, then all the followers of Muhammad prepared to storm Mecca, and they were preparing to have a battle and a fight. And because of that, they all took an oath to Muhammad that they would fight to the death to do this. And that makes no sense, because by this stage in the story, they'd already had 3 major encounters with the Quraysh. They had the Battle of Badr, which is where the Muslims, the followers of Muhammad, had attacked a Meccan caravan, a Quraysh caravan, and then the Quraysh had sent up armies to. They'd got wind of this, so they sent up an army to confront Muhammad, and they had a pitched battle in which many of the Quraysh had died. They'd also had the Battle of Uhud, which is where the Quraysh went and besieged, or they didn't besiege. The army was encamped outside Yathrib, and Muhammad went out with his army, and they had a pitched battle there, and Muhammad himself was allegedly almost killed in that. We have this rather nice, not nice, rather convenient story that he gets hit on the head, and his helmet is so deformed that they couldn't take the helmet off, and because of that, the Meccans didn't know who he was and didn't realize that was Muhammad, and he's escaped by the skin of his teeth. And then you'd had the Battle of the Trench, which is where the Meccans had besieged Muhammad within Yathrib, and he'd held them all at bay by this great deep trench that was able to hold an army of 10,000 people at bay for a week or two. And so when they went down from Yathrib down to Mecca, they must have known that they were going to likely have to have a fisticuff, so likely have to fight in order to get in there. It doesn't make any sense that they would say, "Oh, we better all take oaths to fight." It would have been understood. Would have been understood long ago. Why didn't they take an oath before the Battle of Badr or before the Battle of Uhud? Why would they only take? The answer is because this is the instance in the Quran where the taking of an oath is mentioned, so it has to take place here, even though this is the fourth encounter. And the third point of contradiction, I would say, is where it talks about it being expelled, because in the traditional narrative, that is, I'm referring here really to the work of Ibn Ishaq as it was later preserved. Muhammad wasn't expelled from Mecca. He was never expelled from Mecca. Muhammad announced the permission to fight in. According to Ibn Ishaq, he announced it after the second pledge of Aqaba. So, and he hadn't been threatened at any stage by this time, and he seemed to have after that. He had the night journey when he was sleeping in the hijra, in the hatting, the little circular area next to the Kaaba. So Muhammad hadn't been expelled from Mecca at the time that this verse was. Well, we hadn't been expelled at the time that the permission to fight occurred. Muhammad left of his own free will. So I don't think that the traditional narrative meets the test at all. It looks like people have invented different parts of the story to explain different bits of the text, and maybe they did that even before the whole Quran canon had been prepared. So people are preparing part of the story in isolation, not knowing what's in the other texts. And then poor Ibn Ishaq has to try and cobble it all together and make some sense out of it 100 years later.
Maybe, can I add something? I covered this last week. I did a series called Polemics, which covers, I think, from the 8th century to the 14th century or the 15th century, all of the Islamic historians, these were the major scholars of each century that I went through their writings on St. Paul, to discuss why they hate Paul so much, but also what they said about him. Now, before I get to what I have on the screen here, there are multiple stories. We covered one yesterday of where Jesus is taken into heaven, right? Lifted up into heaven by Allah. There's one that has become the standard, the popular narrative. However, there are many of these. In this series, in this polemic series, I cover about 7 or 9 of these stories. They're all contradictory. They all have totally different details. They all are, and there's no reason to prefer one over another. It's just that one has become a standard for whatever random reason. They've just picked one, or one just became popular, right? But if you look at different scholars, major scholars in Islam of each period, they all have a totally different story, completely contradicting all the other scholars before them. And in fact, many contradictory stories existed at the same time, just like in the tafsirs. Now, for instance, with Paul, these Islamic scholars that set the tone, that set the opinions, that set the history, that set the beliefs of Muslims, that are still valid today, that stories that Muslims still repeat today. For instance, they claim that Paul was the king of the Jews. They thought that Paul was King Saul. They thought that Christians followed Islam for 81 years after Jesus died. They said that Paul was a wicked Jew who committed suicide. He killed himself to destroy Christianity. How that story makes sense, I don't know, but I didn't write it. Paul was a good Christian, and he influenced the Romans to kill the Jews. But Paul was a good Jew who committed suicide to destroy the Christians. Christians never believed in Jesus' divinity, and Paul invented the Trinity. Paul also caused the Crusades, which was fought to hide Paul's lies because the Muslims were about to reveal the truth of how Paul corrupted the Bible, and therefore the Crusades started to stop the Muslims from revealing this truth. And then also a Muslim believer saves Christ's teachings and a whole bunch of other things, right? There's a whole bunch of these stories. Now, the thing is that you can find, at least in these narratives, you can go through, you can lay out all of these top Muslim scholars, all of these great giants of Muslim intellect and learning over the centuries, and you can find they are clearly just making things up. They're clearly wrong. For instance, let me just go here. I'll show you something that's relevant here. So Paul also corrupted Christianity, but what he did was he found the three leaders of the three major Christian sects that existed in his day: the Nestorians, the Jacobites, and the Melkites. So he took Melkite, some guy called Melkite, and he gave him teachings that were in contradiction to the teachings he gave to the Jacobites, which were in total contradiction to the teachings he gave to Nestor from the Nestorians, right? He taught them three separately contradictory things and sent them out and said, I have taught you the truth. You are my secret disciple, and you have the truth. Go and convert men and go and teach what I have taught you. And he gave them three separate stories to go and cause deliberate confusion. The problem is the Nestorians are from the 5th century. That's 400 years after Paul died. Same for the Jacobites and the Melkites. They come way after, hundreds of years after Paul died. But this was literally the story that Muslim scholars were telling. Now, luckily, we have the records, and we can see that these people were nothing short of utterly retarded, right? These are intellectual midgets, right, who were either fabricating or lying or just were clueless. We can also see that in many cases, if you go through this series, that they didn't actually have a Bible. They were taking secondhand, third-hand, fourth-hand stories and making stuff up. And then in Spain, they obviously ran into the Catholics and they ran into the Bible, and they were like, oops, we made a mistake. And they had to then say the Bible was wrong because the stories they've been telling out of the Quran were clearly false. Now they had the comparison with the Bible, right, in Spain. So we can see all of this happening. Within the Quran, though, we know that they burned all of those Qurans, right? So they burned a whole bunch of Qurans so they could get rid of these contradictory stories. But we can see the same process has happened with the other historical and narratives, but here they didn't manage to kill them all. They just simply hush them. They hide them under the carpet. They don't talk about them. They pick one narrative and they push it hard. So the same must have happened with the Quran as well. They had multiple contradictory stories and they settled on just one in many cases.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lloyd. Muslim scholars disagree about the most silliest thing. When I read and I read and I get tired of reading, you're talking about a word in the Quran does not have a meaning. It's a foreign word. We know it's Syriac or Hebrew or whatever, Coptic, Latin. And they come up with many different ways of saying it, pronouncing it. And they come up with different meaning of it, and Allah knows best. I'm talking about a word. It doesn't make any difference. Something so ridiculously silly. So ridiculous silly. Now, when you get to doctrine and teaching, they all disagree. And as you just said, they're making stuff up as they go. And the poor naive Muslim who reads their belief, reads their teaching, oh yeah, and Allah knows best, and they don't know. So they're making up stuff and a simple word or stories out of nothing. I was listening to Brother Paul a minute ago, and he's talking about the 3 battles. Well, how do we know that the 3 battles even ever took place? If it's the Badr or Hudaybah or the trench, it's all stuff made up hundreds of years. And I love what Joseph Goebbels said: if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people eventually come to believe it. Yes, indeed, Muslim believe garbage. Lots of lies have been taught. And the funny thing is, why you believe this one and not this one or this one or this one? Why you pick up one of 10 different stories and you make it the true story? It's a problem.
Now, for instance, Paul is known as you know, Bulus al-Shimshati, right, in Islam, right? Now, not only does one of these major scholars, and these are people that you find Western scholars like will fawn over some scholar. Like you'll take the guy who wrote the Muqaddimah. Who wrote the Muqaddimah? This was, just help me out here. The Muqaddimah. Ibn Khaldun, yeah. They'll say, oh my God, Ibn Khaldun was amazing. The man walked on water. He floated on air. He was an intellectual giant. Oh my God, look, he was so crazy, amazing, right? The problem is, yes, they picked one thing where the guy accidentally got his facts right, and they harp on about it. They fawn over him like he's a genius. But you go to his other writings, and the guy's, excuse my French, fucking idiot, right? Clearly making stuff up, pulling it out of his butt. Totally wrong. Of the stuff but they don't focus on that. They don't show you the guy was a complete retard historically.
Yeah.
For instance, they not only confuse Paul with King Saul, right? Some scholars confuse him with King Saul. They think Paul of Tarsus is King Saul, but in other cases, other scholars, Muslim scholars, confuse Saint Paul with Paul of Samosata, which they call him Bulus al-Shimshati, the bishop of Antioch in 260 AD. Right, who was a heretic.
Yeah.
So these scholars, these Muslim scholars, have no idea what they're talking about. We see this all over. If we actually just take their historical works and read them, I mean, this goes from the 8th through to the 14th, 15th century. I studied this stuff. It's ridiculous. It's a joke.
Yeah. I don't call them.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't call them scholars. I call them dumbers. And they told me, Usama, there's no English word called dumbers. I said, it is. Read it in my book. It's written. They make up stuff all the time. And people have a high esteem of them. Like, wow. When in reality, like you talk about Ibn Khaldun, yeah. Ibn Khaldun made some statements I use in my presentation of slavery in Islam. If you have read it today, they will hang you from a tree. Literally. Calling black people quite dumb like animals. I mean, literally, can you imagine that statement come from a great Muslim thinker?
Yeah.
The author come on.
It's embarrassing. So does that add to the conversation? I mean, your thoughts on what I've just said here?
Yeah. It's terrible.
No, I agree.
If we can just add on the subject of we were going back, I mentioned those battles, and someone was saying, there's no evidence for them. What one thing would be interesting, what happened to the ditch that they dug, because this ditch was supposedly so deep it would hold an army of 10,000 people at bay for weeks. So it must have been quite a substantial thing. It wouldn't have been like 2 or 3 feet deep. It would have to have been I don't know how deep a pit would have to be, and it would be colossal in its length to block off a whole city. But where is it?
What did Brother Paul? What did they fill this trench with?
Well, somebody must have come along afterwards and filled it all in. But why? Why would they have done that? But there's no trace of it now.
I think the answer is just simple, and I think we all know it quite well. When we see like what Lloyd showed, these people had no idea about Paul, so everybody's just saying things, and then there is this huge corpus of nonsense. We look at the Quran, they don't know what happened on the cross. Everybody's saying something different. We see Mary, sister of Aaron. Everybody's saying something different. So why is it different when we look at verses that talk about the Battle of Badr or about Mecca? And it's like, no, it's exactly the same thing. They had this text. It was talking about something that was inconvenient, and then they just made up stories to try to make make that into a relevant and making it all very divine and about Muhammad, and it's all nonsense. So I think maybe next times we need to consider just talking about the fabricating of the narrative, because I mean, Lloyd just started to talk about this yesterday, and it was phenomenal. And just to bring it back in a little bit with the whole Jerusalem thesis, a question for you, gentlemen. Am I right in thinking that the first time that Mecca appears in any source at all is right here on a screen, is in the Quran, and then outside of the Quran, it doesn't appear until, I think Patricia Cron said middle 8th century, but I could be getting this wrong?
Yeah.
Yes and no, because if you take Mecca within its Islamic meaning, you're right, but there was a use of the root Kaka in Arabic before Islam. We have a place in Syria, like I told you, and it's also in the Bible. So it's not it's not something that came out of the blue. There was they were already familiar with the expression, even though they didn't know what it meant. But I agree with you, JC. I completely agree with you.
So if Mecca was in Syria, it was attested, but the Mecca city in the Hijaz is only attested like in the 8th century.
The Byzantine Arab Chronicle in the middle 8th century. It's in the Byzantine Arab Chronicle, middle 8th century. That's 110 years after Muhammad supposedly died. And then also, don't forget, the major deity of the South Arabian religion was the moon god Mecca.
Yeah.
I want to ask something. Who was also known as Allah, by the way. Who was also known as Allah.
Yeah. If you look for the word Jerusalem in the Bible, 767 times, Old Testament and New Testament, Jerusalem. You look for the word Mecca, it's written one time Mecca, another time Mecca. Are you kidding me? You see the difference is? They just, I mean, if you talk about an important place where the prophet of Allah, the messenger of Allah, the final man to give us the final revelation to get rid of everything, and he was from Mecca, you should have at least a couple hundred times, put me Mecca somewhere all over the Quran with information to help me to understand at least the place where Muhammad started his cult. No. Mecca. I don't even know, is it Mecca or Mecca? How do I know? Is with the letter B or the letter M?
Yeah, that was something I wanted to pinpoint.
Sure.
Like JC said, and I completely agree with him. Most of the Islamic narrative, was fabricated to give an Islamic meaning to the text. They had this Quran, they didn't know what it meant, and they had to invent something. So when they looked at the expression Masjid al-Haram or Bayt and so on, they told themselves, we need a sacred place for ourselves. And there was this expression, Bibatni Makata. And in Surah 3, verse 96, there is this thing about the Mecca being a place, the first house, the first temple established for mankind was that at Mecca. So they made connection and they told themselves, our new sacred place must be called Mecca or Mecca. Let's choose a name. So they tossed a coin and they choose Mecca over Mecca, and told that Mecca was just a secondary name. No one knows about it. And I think this is the way they invented the name for Mecca. Because they needed a name. They needed a place, so they needed a name. And they had to make do with what the text said.
Yeah, it seemed to me, whatever Muhammad needed, Allah quickly gave him a verse, as Aisha said, he rushed to your desire. So now the scholars follow the same footstep of Muhammad of receiving the Quran. We need a place. Okay, go ahead. Put Mecca or Mecca. We need this. Yep, here it is. I mean, is it like they fill in what they need as they go?
I have a bit of a theory on this. It'll take me a minute or two to explain. Do I have a minute or two?
Sure.
Okay. One feature, a stylistic feature of the Quran, is that is it seems to its author or authors seem to like pairs of names that differ only in their first consonant. So there are several instances where it will include two figures that will have very similar names, but the first consonant will be different. So, for example, you've got Harun and Karun, who are Aaron and Karen from the Exodus narrative, Korah from the Exodus narrative. You've got the two angels in Surah Al-Baqarah, which led men astray, taught them magic. No, didn't lead them astray, taught them magic in the time of Solomon.
Yeah.
And they're called Harut and Marut. We've got our friends Yajuj and Majuj, who are the Quranic version of Gog and Magog. And one has also from Surah Al-Baqarah, Talut and Jalut. Talut is the name that the Quran gives to King Saul, and Jalut is the name that the Quran has for Goliath. So we've got these four well-known instances where there are pairs of rhyming names. And I found another one. It's Idris and Iblis. Now, these are not quite so obvious because they don't appear in the same narrative. Idris appears to be the name that the Quran gives to Enoch, and Enoch was the man who in the book of Genesis walks with God and then is seen no more upon the earth. And there's a whole esoteric tradition in Judaism about how Enoch was raised up into the heavens and was made into an angel, given the name Metatron. And Iblis comes from the Greek word diablo, and it was the name of the devil in the Quran's Garden of Eden. No, not the Garden of Eden narrative. In the Quran's the angels bowing to Adam narrative. Now they're in different stories, but there is a contrast between the two, because Enoch or Idris starts off as a man and is raised up into the heavens where he becomes an angel, whereas Iblis starts off, as far as the Quran is concerned, amongst the angel, and he's cast down and he comes down to earth to become the tempter of mankind. So even though they are not their narratives aren't connected, there is a parallel between the two, parallel in which the lines go in opposite directions. Now, what do we learn from this? Oh, one other thought. There's another example from this, and this one from the Bible. That this is Ishmael and Israel. So in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, God promises Ishmael that you'll have 12 sons, and your progeny will create a great nation. And this is the Ishmaelites. And then a generation later, he makes a much better promise to Jacob, or to Abraham. He says, "Hey, go through Jacob, and Jacob will have the 12 sons," and he gets renamed as Israel, which is a similar sort of rhyming twin to Ishmael. So it seems to be an idea from the Bible that the Quran author or authors have taken up with enthusiasm and said, that's quite good. Let's have pairs of rhyming names which only differ with the first consonant.
Yeah.
There is
Brother Paul, you forgot two another. I'll say a question that. Brother Paul, you forgot another two rhyme names in the Quran also. Usama and Obama. You forgot these two.
So when one's looking at place names are quite rare in the Quran. By everyone agrees, there are not very many places that are named in the Quran. One or two. Rome is named, and some of the ancient ancient Arab civilizations, but actual specific place names, quite Yathrib is named once, quite few and far between. I find it quite remarkable that there is apparently a place name called Mecca and a place name called Bakka, and I would suggest that that is a remarkable coincidence in itself, that you've got two places which just change the first consonant. But once one is alert to the fact that the Quran authors loved having these pairs of rhyming twins, I think it's not difficult to say that these are two different places. You've got the place that is called Bakka, and then you've got another place that is called Mecca, in the same way that you've got an angel called Harut and an angel called Marut, and so on and so forth. So I think we would be looking for two separate places, would be my view. And of the two, Bakka is the one that is the more certain one, because I agree with Odon, and I don't think it's a particularly original idea, that this is a reference to Psalm 84, and which is a pilgrimage psalm where those making the pilgrimage to Jerusalem stop in the valley of Bakka. So I would say that Bakka is a pilgrimage stop on the way to Jerusalem, and Mecca is somewhere else, and the Quran author created this name for this place in order to rhyme with Bakka for his own purposes, and that is why it doesn't appear on any map. And that's why, as late as the Byzantine Arab Chronicle, the chronicler says, oh yeah, there's a place called Mecca, but we don't know where it is. That's why it is, because it's a made-up name for a valley.
The valley of Bakim in the Arabic language, Wadi Buka. Buka, Baka, Buka. See the closest to it? It is the valley of Bakim, Wadi Buka, Wadi Baka. That's where it comes from. And these, not only the words of the names of cities, the entire Quran is built on the rhymes. So you see many verses in the Quran end with word, could be Arabic, but it's not Arabic because he changed a letter or two in the end of it. So it's like, why he changed the word of the writing, the alphabet, the letters, the spelling of the word, to make the rhyme fit. And when you go read the scholars of Islam, that is, and they give you a bunch of BS reasons why the word is not written right in the Arabic language. But they was one of the good ones, they always say, as the scholars, the poets used to write, and they always do that and give you another poet who made similar thing, changing a word, changing the end of the word to make the rhyme. Excuse me. Is the Quran the word of Allah written in the guarded board? Or now we're copying the ideas of some people making rhymes in their poetry? It is so stupid to change sentence structures, words, spellings to make the rhyme, and you make it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Yasin. You go there, in. So you go in these verses of the Quran, you see, word is supposed to end with un. No, they change it with in to keep it with Yasin, the beginning word of the chapter. Why you put wrong words of the poetry? So yeah, Buka, Baka makes no difference.
Yeah, you notice also that there is a valley of Becca. So if you have to make a sort of twin expression, it has to be a valley of Mecca. And
yes, but just as Safa and Marwa are two hills, you have to have two valleys. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the whole problem with Becca and Mecca, it just shows how they actually invented the narrative. So they are trying to make sense of the Quran, and then they get to that part. They have a number of things that they can build, but in the end, whoever made the executive decision to say, okay, so do you see here Becca? Becca is Mecca is the same. Trust me, bro. There is no attestations. It's never been mentioned like this. It's yes because someone said in here Mecca appears only once. This is embarrassing. So that Becca over there is Mecca over here as well. Trust me, bro. And it's like, no, they're telling us very clearly how they made up all of this in order to make sense. And I think we have all learned that they didn't make it make sense.
Oh, okay. So we can agree that my hypothesis on this passage of the Quran referring to possibly the 614 conquest of Jerusalem is possible.
Yeah, I mean, why would why would the Quraysh find in the corner, and what corner, a writing in Syriac on the Kaaba? You know, I mean, it's just really odd. Syriac, I mean, that's Christian. That's going to be Christian. I'm the Allah, the Lord of Bakka, which says that's God, the Lord of Bakka, which will be Jerusalem.
How convenient. How
I
convenient.
have to say, Odon, I'm not entirely convinced that it all relates to 614. I have to concede. I would have put this later during the jihad period of the Quran.
Maybe
there is a point in the Quran, what you might call an early part of the Quran, such as where I think I've mentioned before, the Surah of the Elephant and Abu Lahab, Surah al-Masad, and these, I think, are anti-Sasanian polemic. This is at a time when when Jerusalem is under siege, and they are borrowing language from the Book of Maccabees or from other sources, Book of Daniel, in order to encourage the defenders of Jerusalem who are under siege from the Sasanians, from the Persians. But there then comes a stage where the scene shifts, and there is a declaration of war, as it were, in Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah 48, and they say, let's go and fight. And it seems to me that that's a later period than 614. I agree that it's all about Jerusalem. It's all looking at Jerusalem, but I don't think the Quran is so martial. I don't think it's very military in the early period, and it becomes military at a later period. And I would suggest maybe after the end of the war.
It might be, but you will see in my next slide. I want to go to this period of time, but there is one thing that we can be absolutely sure. This passage talks about a moment when the believers had almost or had access to the Temple Mount, and historically it has been proved that they had access. They accessed the Temple Mount starting from 638. And there is also a possibility in 614. So my hypothesis is that it is referring to 614, but it could refer rather to 638. I'm not adamant on my hypothesis here. This is what I propose in my book, but I think it could be changed without hurting my main theory.
I think I agree with you, Odon, that there was a time when the believers had access to the Temple Mount, and that was in 614. So I agree with you. In my opinion, these surahs that I regard as anti-Sasanian, the elephant and the companions of the pit and Abu Lahab and so on, I think these were written in the vicinity of Jerusalem because they refer to this house. And they talk about the Lord of this house, and that the proximate pronoun this implies that they are close to the place that they are talking about. Yeah. So if God is the Lord of this house, that suggests to me that they're in Jerusalem at that time, which is why they are so concerned about the Sasanians defiling what they're trying to do. So I totally with you. I don't disagree with that part of the analysis at all.
There is in my reasoning another thing to tip the scale in favor of this, referring to 614. If you take the whole pattern of the Islamic narrative about the story of Muhammad, he is in the holy city, a holy city that is ruled by associationists. He is expelled, and then he comes back and he conquers it. And there is if we make a parallel with actual history, it could mean that Muhammad, or the persons impersonating the Messiah or nicknamed Muhammad, they were once in Jerusalem, they were expelled, and thereafter they came back and they conquer it from the hands of the associationists, namely the Christians. And so there would have been a moment where Muhammad was in Jerusalem. And this is why I think it makes sense with this 614 hypothesis. But it can be discussed. And if you agree, we can go on to the next step, which is the 638 period. First of all, let's establish something. Jerusalem Temple has been rebuilt by an alliance of Arabs and Jews, or supposedly Jews, people who were described as Jews, around 638. I think it's one of the grand discoveries of Islamology from the modern Islamology. We rediscovered sources that describe this event, like this letter from the Academy of Jerusalem to the diaspora communities in Egypt, which was quoted in Alfred Louis de Prémar book, a very fundamental.
To show it again, Odon? To show it again?
Les fondations.
Just pull it back.
Les fondations. Les fondations de l'islam. It has been written in French. Alfred Louis de Prémar was the most prominent Islamologist of the 20th century. Really. And in his book, there is every material to understand the beginnings of Islam, but he didn't put forth a theory. He left it to others. But he was very, very clever. He is the one who hinted at the existence of Judeo-Nazarenes to Edouard Marie Galès. And he told him, look for them in Syria, for example. But let's go back to the presentation. In this source, we have this: when the Arabs came to Jerusalem, there were with them men from among the sons of Israel who showed them the place of the temple. Another source, the Pratum Spirituale, the Georgian version of John Moskius, which has been discussed, for example, by Stephen Shoemaker in his book, A Prophet Has Appeared. I think it's also in Robert Hoyland's Seeing Islam as Others Saw It. So here we have this account of the event running quickly. The godless Saracens reached the place that is called the Capitolium, so the Temple Mount. They took some men, some by force, some willingly, to clean the place and to build that accursed thing, which is for prayer and which is called by them a Mizgita, a masjid. We have the Armenian Chronicle, which is attributed to Sebeos. I will also speak about the plots of the seditious Jews who, when they secured an alliance with the Hagarenes for a little while, devised a plan to rebuild the Temple of Solomon And when they found the spot that is called the Holy of Holies, they rebuilt it with a fixed edifice, a place for prayers. And when the Ishmaelites became envious of them, they drove them out from that place and called the same house of prayer their own. The former then built there a place for their prayers in another spot at the base of the temple. It might be the dome of the chain. It could be this. We have also this account from Arculfus, who was a bishop from Bordeaux in France, or in the Frankish kingdom at the time. In 670, he visited Jerusalem as a pilgrim, and he wrote about his pilgrimage and his pilgrimage in the whole Holy Land. But he wrote specifically that in Jerusalem, in that famous place where once stood the magnificently constructed temple near the eastern wall, the Saracens now frequent a rectangular house of prayer which they have built. And I think this is evidence enough to make us understand that the temple had been rebuilt by an alliance of Arabs and Jews. There are also hints at this in Anastasius of Sinai. He talks about Egyptian workers being being forced to work at the construction of the new temple. And also we have clues in the Islamic tradition. In the Islamic tradition, there is a story of a Jewish convert to Islam who was a companion of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and who asked him permission to build an oratory, a masjid, on the Temple Mount. His name was Ka'b al-Ahbar, and no Jews builds anything on the Temple Mount but the temple. We have also several mentions in the Jewish tradition of Umar, for example. This is in the memories of Rabbi Shimon forgot his name, Shimon ben Yochai, I think, that Umar rebuilt the Temple of Solomon, and there are other mentions. So the temple was rebuilt by around 638 when the Arabs took over Jerusalem, and they were led by Jews, or supposedly Jews. And if we look at the Quran, there might be mentions to a project for the rebuilding of the temple. I think this is what the verse 125 in Surah 2, which we already saw previously when we are looking at the place of Abraham and the house, the bait, and so on. I think this verse is about this project of rebuilding the temple. Take the standing place of Abraham as a place of prayer. Imagine a preacher proclaiming to an audience, take the standing place of Abraham as a place of prayer. Of course, he might be alluding to a situation in the past where God asked Abraham to do this. But imagine the thing. Why would Abraham, according to the Islamic narrative, why would God say to Abraham himself, take the standing place of Abraham as a place of prayer? He would say, take your standing place as a place of prayer. If he is actually God speaking to Abraham. So I think here, it's not about God speaking to Abraham, asking him, take the standing place of Abraham as a place of prayer. It's about the preacher who is proclaiming this Quranic verse to an Arab audience, urging his audience, take the standing place of Abraham as a place of prayer. So go to Jerusalem, conquer Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, and establish it as a place of prayer. The same goes with both of you purify my house and so on. And if you understand the context like this, then this idea of a covenant with Abraham and Ishmael is something else, becomes something else. In my opinion, this divine covenant that the Quran speaks about is a covenant between the figure of Abraham, meaning the Jews, the right Jews, the good Jews, the Nazarene Jews, and the figure of Ishmael, meaning the Ishmaelites, the Arab believer who had converted to Nazarenism.
Yeah.
And I think it's a description of both the project of rebuilding the temple and the alliance between Jews and Arabs that these ancient authors were speaking about when they were explaining the rebuilding of the temple around 638.
You know, it's amazing. I hate to stop you talk here, but I look at these verses many times. In Quran chapter 2, beginning from verse 124. 124, Allah tested Abraham with words. And Abraham said, and who is my descendants? No children. The name there itself is wrong. It should be Abraham, not Abraham. But forget about that. You go to the following verse, 125. Allah is talking about the place of Abraham. And people, whatever it is, take that place of Abraham as a place of worship. That's cool. That's good. And then Allah mentioned Abraham and Ishmael. Look at the order of the verses. Something is missing.
Yeah.
Okay. Abraham and Ishmael purify the house for those who will be circling and worshiping and kneeling. So the house is there. They're gonna purify the house. They clean the house. Go to the following verse, 126. Abraham is praying to Allah to make that city a place, a good place with fruit and on, whatever, and gives him enjoyment for a little. And Allah said, yeah. Whoever become infidel, I'll give him enjoyment for a little, and then I'll send them to hell. Good. You go to the following verse 127. Abraham was raising with his son the foundation of the house. What in the world Muhammad is smoking or drinking? Those who put these verses. There's no order. There's no connection. 123, 24, 25, 26, 27. This is the best dish of salad I have ever seen in my life. Literally, the lettuce with the tomato, with the cucumber, and the olives, and the dressing, all mixed together. Where is order? What is the logic? Where is the common sense? And then you go to the following verse 128, and Abraham is praying, oh Allah, make us Muslims. And from our, it's just stupid. I hate to even waste my time to talk about it. But that is the beauty of the Quran. No order, chaos, things written. It's just, yeah, I'm done.
I think those verses are mingled. They are not in the right order. If you put them in the right order, you can have a logical connection. Because, like I explained, I think this verse 125 is about the project of rebuilding the temple. But the other one I want to talk about, the one you already quoted, 127, it's also about this, but contrary to what you said, it is not on the past tense. If you look at the Arabic word for raise, it's yarfa'u, and it's not a past tense.
Is yarfa Ibrahim. It is present tense, not past tense. It's right now. It's happening right now. I'm talking to you.
And if you put it in the context, I explained, the context of having the project to rebuild the temple, then you can understand it in the future tense. Then Abraham will raise the foundation of the house with Ishmael. And you see, it's this sequence. I should have put all the verses because they are all very important. All the verses that you read. This sequence is a program. It's a program. Make a divine alliance with me, you the Jews, you the Arabs. Make a divine alliance with me, God. Go rebuild the temple.
Yeah.
And you will
But
purify it and so on. And the conclusion, you will raise the temple.
Yeah, but in real life, did Abraham ever build a house? Abraham lived in a tent and travel in a tent and die without knowing what is a house.
You're right. So it's not about the historical or biblical Abraham here. It's an analogy. It's not the real Abraham. It's a figure of Abraham.
Exactly.
Which is the right descendants of Abraham, the right Jews, the Nazarene Jews. And the same with Ishmael. Ishmael never built a house. So it's a figure of Ishmael that is being featured here. And this figure are the Ishmaelites. And because we see in the Quran that there is something with the temple, there is this verse in Surah 53. The beginning of Surah 53 is a sort of apocalyptical vision, a vision of the messianic times, of the end times. What will happen in the end times? The scroll will be unfolded. Apocalyptic events will take place. Let me just find it in the text. No, it's not 53, it's 54. No, it's not 54. Come on, I've lost my reference here. Frequented. No, it's Surah 52. Excuse me. I will change it. It's 52. Excuse me. Okay. No, this changes everything. If you look at Surah 52 at Tur, by the mount, by a book inscribed in a parchment spread open, and by the house that is serviced, al-Mamuri house, the frequented house according to the Islamic narrative. But we saw when we talk about the Umrah that it can also mean, and it literally means, that the house is serviced by priests. The temple has been put back to use. The ancient cult of Moses, the religion of Moses, has been reinstalled. Sacrifice go on. And this is what will happen in the end of times. So it's a frequented, serviced. Excuse me, there are many mistakes here. Up. No, voilà. No, it's good. No, it's good. So there is this theme of the temple being rebuilt in connection with the end times. And now we go to another period. It's in Surah 9, and in Surah 9 we understand from the context and from what's written that the believers have ultimately conquered Jerusalem because they have now accessed Masjid al-Haram. So Surah 9, Tawbah, in verse 3, it mentions many things. It mentions especially this a proclamation from God and his messenger to the people on the day of the Hajj. So the Hajj is taking place, or maybe it has taken place, meaning that they have finally got back to Jerusalem. So they have accessed the Temple Mount. And there what happens, how can the associationists, so the Christians, have a treaty with God and with his messenger, except those with whom you have made a treaty at Masjid al-Haram? There had been, around 638, such a treaty. The Bishop of Jerusalem, Sophronius, he made an arrangement, a sort of treaty with the Arabs. And by this, he opened the doors of Jerusalem to them without violence. And the Arabs didn't plunder and kill the Christians in Jerusalem. And I think this is what this verse is about. This verse talks about the Arabs finally making the Hajj, meaning they have accessed Jerusalem. They have taken the Temple Mount, and they have rebuilt the temple, since there is a Masjid al-Haram. They have rebuilt the temple, like we saw in the previous slide with the sources about the temple being rebuilt.
Yeah.
There is another verse in the same surah, verse 107, that can be understood also in this context of Jerusalem having been conquered and the Masjid al-Haram, the temple, having been rebuilt. Those who have taken a masjid to cause harm and disbelief in division among the believers, never stand in it. A mosque, a masjid founded from the first day on the obligation of guarding oneself is indeed more worthy for you to stand in. Their building, which they have built, will continue to be a cause of doubt in their hearts.
Yeah.
What we know is that after the Arabs took over Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple, there was an enmity between some Arab factions and between some Arabs and the Jews that accompanied them. Sebeos, the Chronicle of Sebeos talks about a feud or a dispute between the Jews and the Arabs about the occupation of the rebuilt temple.
Yeah.
I think this is what it is about. It talks about the first fitna, the first dissensions between Arab factions.
Yeah. Sedition. Brother Lloyd, can you open to me Genesis chapter 14 on the screen if you can? Genesis chapter 14 and beginning from verse 14. Genesis 14. I believe when Muslims say Abraham built the Kaaba, Abraham built the house, they're so ignorant of Abraham. They don't know jack about Abraham, as Adam Ticker always says. They think Abraham a guy who's gonna grab the bricks or the rocks, smooth them out, mix the cement, and come on, Ishmael, help me, son, grab me a rock, and he could not. And that is a rock which is the angel Jibril brought to Abraham from India to build the temple. Abraham is a guy by himself. He have no people. Him and Ishmael got tired. I'm tired, Dad. I don't want to help you to build the temple in it, the house of prayer, the Kaaba anymore. Listen what the Bible said about Abraham, not Abraham. Before he have Ishmael, before he have Isaac, when he was just simply Abraham. What does the Bible say there, Brother Lloyd? Genesis 14.
Yep, Genesis
14. Go to verse 14, brothers, for the sake of time, because I really have to go. What do we read there?
When Abraham heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan.
That is when Lot was taken. That's when Lot was taken as a captive of war. Him and his wife and his kids and everybody. He grabbed Abraham, grabbed 318 men. These are not little boys. These are fighters. These are warriors. These are his slaves. I know he added other people to join him because he could not do it by himself. So if Abraham would like to build the temple, the Kaaba, the 3-story house, he can build it in half a day. As a matter of fact, you don't need half a day. The guys, while they're smoking the cigarette or smoking the pipe, as Brother Odie does, and Abraham will be enjoying the pipe. Here's the first 6 layer, have breakfast, another 6 layer, lunch. Hey, it's finished. You don't need to beg your son to help you to build the Kaaba. He does not have to carry a piece of wood. It all be done by his slaves in less than half a day. Bam, done. It'll be twice as big. It is stupid. The scholar of Islam is stupid. Allah is stupid because Jibreel was stupid, because Muhammad is stupid. They don't know jack about Abraham, and they talk about Abraham building the Kaaba and purifies the Kaaba, grab a broom and clean it up. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You don't know Abraham. That's Abraham, by the way. That's before he had his children. He got richer and richer to the point that Abimelech said, let's make a covenant now. Don't hurt me. Don't hurt my people. He was feared by the people. If it was Abraham was his boy Ishmael down south in Mecca, mashallah. Stupid is, stupid does. That's what it is. The Quran is stupid for dumb.
May I add something? Just joining actually the comments from Odon and from Usama. So what Odon said earlier, that if you read this, basically if you read it neutrally and you think, okay, who does it sound like is this is saying these verses? You unpack a lot of the Quran in that manner. If you read the Quran neutrally, there will be verses that they will be clearly just taken from Jesus, some from Paul and the apostles, and so on. So just by thinking, where does this fit? So like what Odon has done is perfect. Like you just read that and says, could it actually fit that they are just commanding people to go to Jerusalem and do these things? And it sort of fits. So like this, you unpack a lot of the Quran. Now, what we are told in the narrative, which of course it's all false, and all we have to do is read the tafsirs to see that everybody's making up a different story. What we are told from those people is that everything is about Muhammad. But people would have known. You cannot actually tell them they're in Mecca, that didn't exist, but imagine that it were, to say, no, Abraham was here. Those people were not stupid. They knew that Abraham was all about Jerusalem and so on. So we are told, no, Muhammad said to these idiots, Abraham was here and everyone was here, and people believed him. No, they would not have believed it. And also, Muhammad dies, in theory, he dies, and in a handful of years, they conquer Jerusalem. These people could not be idiots, so gullible that you tell them Abraham was here and people go, no, it doesn't work that way. So when you think about the verse and you imagine Muhammad there speaking to the crowd, nothing makes sense, just like when you read the tafsirs. So any story is more plausible, and the Quran seems to be telling either a history of something happening elsewhere, certainly not in the Hijaz, and many of the stories as well from the Talmud, Jewish legends, Christian legends, and so on. So, but just read it neutrally, and you will see that Muhammad doesn't fit speaking to a crowd unless everybody had a room temperature IQ.
Yeah. Well, you think about, you said the tafsir does not make any sense. The tafsir, the interpretation of the scholars of Islam to these verses, added buckets and buckets and gallons of water to the muddy Quran. It did not help. It make it worse, because they're talking from empty head. They don't know anything about what they're talking about.
One point I'd just like to add about the Surah Al-Baqarah and the laying of the foundations of the house is that a house it doesn't seem to have meant necessarily a house that you live in with a door and windows and a roof. I'm not sure that's what is meant there by a house. In the Bible, the first house that is created, the house of God, is at Bethel, isn't it? Long before the binding of Isaac, Jacob goes and sleeps at some sort of shrine, and he puts his head down on a stone, and he has a dream in which he sees the heavens above him, and he sees angels going up and down on a ladder or stairway of some sort. And then he wakes up in the morning and he says, "This is the house of God," which is what Bethel actually means. It means the Beit El is the house of God. So God doesn't have to live in a house with windows and a door and a roof. It could be simply an altar, and of course later on in the Exodus narrative, God dwells on the caperet of the Ark of the Covenant. So God doesn't dwell in a house. That could be the I'm not sure if that's referred to as a house, but it's certainly the dwelling of God. So when they're talking about building the foundations of the house, or when they talk about purifying the house, it doesn't necessarily mean that the house has got to be, the temple has got to be building at that building. The temple has got to be standing at that time. It's perfectly feasible that they are talking about purifying the foundation stone of the temple, and then starting to lay the foundations around it, which, as I think I mentioned on an earlier stream, the way the Temple Mount is, you've got to build up the foundations to build the temple on top of it. So laying the foundations does mean raising up land around the stone, not just it doesn't, because normally you would dig foundations, you don't normally raise them. The other point I'd just make is there is one school of thought promoted by a gentleman called Joseph Whitsom in an article called The Foundations of the House, in which he links this passage to a poem of Jacob of Saru called On Abraham and His Types. And this is not at all implausible, because there are various connections between the Quran and the writings of Jacob of Saru. In Surah Al-Kahf, which we've mentioned before, Surah 18, there are 4 stories told. You've got Moses and the fish, the sleepers in the cave, Al-Qidra and
Alexander the Great, Zulkarnain.
and Al-Qidra and I forget. But there are 4 stories in Surah Al-Kahf, and 3 of them have strong connections to the writings of Jacob of Saru. So, including most prominently the story of the sleepers in the cave, which has a lot in common with Jacob of Saru's homily on the 7 sleepers of Ephesus. So it's by no means implausible that the people who wrote the Quran would have been familiar with Jacob of Saru's work. And on this homily on Abraham, he says at one stage, the master builder of faith, which refers to Abraham, approached, this is during the binding of Isaac, in order to build there, that's on the Mount Moriah, a house for the mysteries that would take place. And when Isaac gazed and saw what his father was doing, he himself lifted stones in order to bring them forth to build the altar. So there seems to be a connection there with the passage in Surah Al-Baqarah that needs a little bit of unpacking to work out precisely what's going on. But it doesn't mean, to return, it doesn't mean that it has to be a house. Jacob of Saru is obviously playing on the idea that the altar upon which Abraham was preparing to sacrifice Isaac was the foundation, in some sense, of the temple that would later be built upon that same site in order to house the Ark of the Covenant. And that would be the house of God. And in the earlier stage is effectively the foundation of the later stage.
Yeah, makes sense.
But what about
Jewish tradition?
You're thinking you're thinking with your brain. Muslims don't. When you talk about that Kaaba we see right now in Mecca, that is the one Abraham built.
Yeah, of course. Even though it was destroyed in 1620, even though every stone of it is being replaced every 10 years by the Saudis.
Listen, that Kaaba, it's the same one, and you're just a Islamophobic guy. You're teaching lie. You're an infidel. I don't believe you. That is Abraham built it there. I mean, even if you think about it, with all the history we know about the building, they don't know it. They care less. They care less about knowing it, which the whole thing does not make any sense anyway. Yeah.
But the thing is, from the outside, us as non-Muslims, we understood the Quran. We understood what it was about. We understood that the original Kaaba was the temple in Jerusalem, and that in the end, everything in the Quran, not everything, but most, all the description of a sacred city with a pilgrimage, a temple, the place of Abraham, and so on, it doesn't refer to Mecca, it refers to Jerusalem. Because in the end, Lloyd, if you can display my screen, in the end, Jerusalem is a sacred city of the Quran. If we look at everything in Mecca, the Bayt, it's a temple in Jerusalem. Masjid al-Haram, the Temple Mount, the place of Abraham, it's a place of Abraham in Jerusalem, in the temple, on the Temple Mount. The Kaaba, it's the temple in Jerusalem. Safa and Marwa, there are Mount Safa and Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, the place of the Hajj and Umrah. They are the Hajj to the temple in Jerusalem, and Umrah, meaning the service or the sacrifices to the temple in Jerusalem. The gathering place or the standing place that is mentioned in Surah 5, verse 97, it is the Jerusalem as a place where the nations will be judged. The mother of cities, it's the mother of cities, of course, it can be Jerusalem. Becca as another name for Mecca. It's the Becca that we talked about, a place near Becca, the Valley of Tyre mentioned in Psalm 84. The direction of prayer towards Mecca that we discussed say a few episodes back. It's a direction of prayer towards Jerusalem, the place where the believers were expelled from, supposedly Mecca, according to the Islamic narrative. It could be, according to my hypothesis, Jerusalem in 694, but we can also have the hypothesis that there were some believers that were expelled from Jerusalem after 638, in the midst of the fights of the fitna between the Arab factions. The objective of the Islamic conquest, which is supposed to be Mecca, eventually, ultimately, in 638, we saw it. It was all about Jerusalem, which was the objective of the Jewish Arab conquest. So every description of Mecca within the Quran, every description that the Islamic narrative attributes to Mecca within the Quran, actually it makes sense with Jerusalem. And mostly it makes way better sense with Jerusalem. So if we have this in mind, we have to conclude that there are only two hypotheses regarding the sacred city in the Quran. Either there were two cities in the 7th century with identical characteristics, a place of Abraham, Safa and Marwa, and so on. There were two cities, Jerusalem and Mecca, that shared the same identical characteristics. And the Quran happens to refer to Mecca while ignoring Jerusalem, completely ignoring Jerusalem. Or the Quran is in fact referring to Jerusalem rather than Mecca. And so this would imply that what had been regarded as the earliest textual evidence for Mecca, the Quran, can no longer serve as such. And it further calls into question the overall historical reliability of the whole Islamic narrative, to say the least. So this is the conclusion of the part on the Jerusalem thesis. But we can go a bit further by saying that, how does it work? By saying in conclusion that we can also learn from all of this study a new perspective on early Islam. First, there was no unique place of origins for Islam. There was no Mecca, but there was no unique place. The concept of a unique place of origins, it comes from the Islamic narrative. the Islamic narrative needed a place of origin for its prophet in order to legitimize the whole narrative and to legitimize the prophethood of Muhammad. So there is no sense in trying to replace Mecca with another city, whether it be Petra, Jerusalem, or anything else, because there is no unique place of origins. We saw that there were proclamations in multiple places, different places. We saw that there were proclamations most probably in Syria, in Arabia, of course, some of them around the Dead Sea. Remember the pillars of the wife of Lot? There were probably some in Petra, probably elsewhere. We talked about Bahrain also as a possibility for a place of proclamation. And of course, there were proclamations, some of them in Jerusalem, for example, the one in Surah 9. So we established that Jerusalem is the holy city described in the Quran, that there was a project of rebuilding its temple at the core of early Islam. And also, when you put all of this together, most probably there was nothing in the location of Mecca. There might have been a well, the Zamzam well, but there was nothing connected to early Islam. Actually, with all we already established, we have no need for the location of Mecca to explain early Islam, because things happen elsewhere. So there might have been something in this place, but it was not connected to early Islam. And it is not an issue. It's not relevant, actually. So this will be my conclusion for this this whole series, which covered a lot of stuff. So over to you guys. And we lost.
Well done, Odon. Magnificent.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Paul.
Amen.
You had a big part in it.
Yeah,
No, it's extraordinarily well presented. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And believe what is missing in the Muslim head is simple knowledge about the history of the Bible, the geography of the Bible, the fact. I mean, literally, they don't know. It's I feel sorry when I meet Muslims, not the non-Arab who could not read the Quran. I'm talking about the scholars of Islam who's alive today. If they really believe in the Quran, and if they really believe in Muhammad, if they really believe the interpretation of these verses about Mecca and the Quran and Abraham and on, they are so poorly with simple knowledge of the scripture. They can't. If they know a little bit about what the Bible talks concerning Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac, they could not put Abraham in Mecca. And they believe in more than fairy tale. Do you know what they believe? Here is Jerusalem. If you follow me, my finger here is Jerusalem. Here is Mecca. How did Muhammad used to travel from Jerusalem to Mecca? It's a long trip. It's very simple. The earth used to fold. Are you watching me? Once again, here's Mecca, here's Jerusalem. The earth used to fold for Abraham. So he only walked a few miles, maybe a half a mile or so. If they believe in this,
what happened to all the people in between?
Huh?
What happened to the people, all the people in between Mecca and Jerusalem? They got
no, there were no people. It was just Abraham and everything. When Allah destroyed Lot's land, Sodom and Gomorrah, the angel lifted up the city of Lot, because there's a verse said upside down, and by his wing. So the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, by the way, there were 5. Okay, 4 was destroyed, 1 was not. And he lifted up to heaven, and he dropped it upside down. When they lifted up to heaven, listen to this: the people of heaven, the angels, could hear the sound of the rooster, the sound of the dogs barking, and these people are super stupid with great imagination. Not even fairy tale of Tom and Jerry. When I watch Tom and Jerry, I believe it. When I read the Quran and the scholars' interpretation of the Quran, I laugh.
Yeah, they're saying that Islam has developed a fantasy world where reason, logic, history don't apply. I had a conversation once, a debate with a liberal Muslim who was absolutely convinced that the Aramaic alphabet, the Aramaic writing, derived from Arabic, and that there was no Aramaic text before Islam.
MashaAllah.
You see, he was convinced of it because of Islam.
Yeah.
Because
and I guarantee you, Odi, he also believed that the earth spoke to Allah and the heavens spoke to Allah in the Arabic language. The earth opened its mouth and said, "Oh Allah, we are coming to you willingly." Read the Quran.
Yeah.
A simple reading the Quran shows the Muslims are literally mughayyab al-aql, no brain, no common sense, no logic. That's why they're Muslims. Anyway, love you guys. I wish I can stay with you another hour. How long are we going to be here for today? For another, what, 2 more hours, 3 more hours? Lloyd.
Yes, sorry, I'm really busy with a problem I'm trying to fix here, so I haven't been able to focus because I'm trying to solve a personal issue here.
You, man. Listen. We are so humble here. You got the best team with the greatest humility. We forgive you because you're ignoring us. I mean, I've been talking to you.
We're a great team except for me, and I believe that is true. You know?
But I was talking to you for the last half hour, and all what you come, you say that you're busy. Hello?
No, I'm trying to solve a serious problem. But
okay.
you know, unfortunately, I have to now because they're available now.
Listen. You can go back to your business. Odi did a great job, and we love him. That's all. How about that?
So, I mean, this is great. Odon, I mean, the what you've presented so far shows us the standard Islamic narrative, as we've said, it cannot be true. And I mean, there were Muslims and trolls in the chat at various times. I mean, they don't deal with the facts. They don't deal with the history because they fall down on the history. They fall down on the archaeology, right? Which is why they're forced to argue about ideology or theology or the meaning of a verse or the meaning of a word. Because when you say, look, show me the archaeology, show me the hard concrete facts, literally, well, those are missing, right? Show me the source. Show me the early Quran.
Ask a Muslim fellow, go to Mecca and try to live there by only drinking Zamzam water.
Yep.
Oh my word!
Just try it. Just do it.
Yeah,
and you will see if it's possible.
We'll have his funeral soon. We'll celebrate his life soon, and we have a great service. Anyway, God bless you guys. I really have to go. Appreciate you. Love you all. And we'll meet again in another program. Absolutely.
Speak soon, Usama.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Well, first, well done, Odon. It's really been a great series. What I would say is let me appeal to character. So the stories of the apostles, they are absolutely fascinating. They are crazy, right? Miracles and all of these sort of things. We believe them because they went to their deaths saying that is what happened. So we know we can trust them. They didn't do it for fame or money or anything of the sort. When we go to the standard Islamic narrative, the people who were closest to Muhammad, according to that narrative, they backstabbed each other, they lied to one another, they killed one another the moment that Muhammad died. These were warlords. You could not trust them as far as you could throw them. And it gets worse. Once we get to the tafsir writers, those guys, we can prove that they were all lying about everything. We can see how they disagreed about the meaning of every single verse. They didn't know anything. They were making up stories. Those are the same guys that tells us everything that happened in Mecca, in Yathrib, and all of those things. This, if it was a court of law, you would just assess the guy, the witness, and say, you are untrustworthy because you are lying here, everywhere. I cannot trust you on these other things. This is what we see in Islam. We could take any single person who told the stories about what happened and just destroy the whole thing. Those are the guys that told us about Mecca. So it was never Mecca. And I think the obvious, the most, at least one of the main cities that had to be addressed when people are walking around has to be Jerusalem. What else?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And if you think about what they're telling us about how Muhammad enticed his men with women on earth and women and the plurals boys in the eternity, the pillars, that's what they call the Lu'lu al-Masnoon. The white little boys, they're going to serve them like
white
slaves.
women. Hey, let's get it straight. He enticed them with white women.
Yeah, with blue eyes
White women, but also little boys.
What compares that to our Lord Jesus Christ tells them, you will die for me. Sometime by your family, I will show him how much he must suffer for me. That's Saul, who became Paul. I mean, we don't gain anything in this earth, but Muslims got a lot in this earth with the hope for more in the eternity in the gardens. God bless you all. See you. God bless you, Brother Paul, Odin, and JC and Lloyd. Appreciate you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Usama.
Take care. Yeah. So, guys, that was interesting. I mean, we're clearly look. Have you seen in the chat any kind of credible argument made by any Muslim? I've just seen verse spamming. I've seen insults. I've seen all sorts of arbitrary comments to derail, but no actual solid historical archaeological facts presented. No willingness to actually discuss or present facts that we can all go verify, review. Nothing. It just doesn't exist. So these people clearly cannot defend this. And yeah, I think we just need to speak more and more about these issues, especially the historical and archaeological aspect. They have no answer for these problems.
I mean, I would suggest that people have been for quite a long time now. A lot of scholars have been looking at the Quran, trying to work out what it really means. Some different people can have different theories. Jerusalem seems to be the one thing that is absolutely certain. There's just no way that these geographical references in the Quran could be to anywhere else. And it's not, you're not arguing against the Quran. This is what the Quran itself tells us. If Quran is saturated with biblical references, well, where is the house of God in the Bible? It's Jerusalem. It talks about Abraham. Where would Abraham say the house of God was? Well, he would say it was in the promised land, the land that had been promised to him by Yahweh. And if you asked Moses, where's the house of God? Well, he'd say, well, it's the place that the Lord will point out to us when we get to the promised land. And when that place was Jerusalem when it happened. Because ask King David where the house of God was, he would say, well, I was led there by the angel of the Lord. And it was the site on Mount Moriah where Abraham had been had been willing to sacrifice Isaac. If you asked Solomon where the house of God was, he would say, well, it's the temple that I built. And if you ask any Jew after that, they would say it's on the Temple Mount. If you ask Zechariah, where would it be? Well, he would say, well, I'm the priest of the house of God. I go in and I attend the Holy of Holies. Mary, the Quran even says that Mary was grew up in the house of God, and Jesus was conceived there. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Once you can see it, you can't unsee it. It's an absolute cast iron fact about the Quran is that it is talking about Jerusalem. Once you know that, then that becomes the foundation. We would now raise the foundation for trying to unlock everything else that the Quran says. Once you know that it's Jerusalem, you then have to go back to the beginning and read the whole Quran again, knowing that it's about Jerusalem and trying to work out exactly what bit came where and what was going on with the history of the period and so on. But it's the realization that the holy place, the house of God, the Masjid al-Haram has to be Jerusalem is, and to my mind, is absolutely undeniable. And Odin has made a magnificent job over these six podcasts in setting everything out so clearly, building it up methodically, and there can be no reply. because the argument is absolutely rock solid.
Yeah, I like your analogy of raising the thesis from its foundation.
Yes, we're at the foundation for unlocking the Quran.
We go study the hydrology of Mecca, for example. Its location outside of everything, outside of the traditional caravan routes, for example, and then we raise the thesis from its foundation. All right.
Okay.
Are we good, Lloyd, JC?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Yeah, sorry. I'm just really trying to solve an issue. Then I've been distracted because I'm dealing with the support guy was available now. I have to deal with him now. So, but yeah, this is great. So guys, shall we tackle a different topic that I'm thinking of next as a group, and maybe we can go through some other history. I've discussed with you previously, I've got a first century, early second century source, which also, it goes to the history of Islam, but it goes through a first century source, which is a prophet from Persia who receives a book from an angel. An angel gives him a book and makes him the messenger of the supreme deity. And as the messenger of the deity, he, so he deals with this angel. Now, this might sound familiar to you. This story might seem very familiar, right? And this religious idea with this guy with his book, given the commission by an angel who talks to him, is very similar to another religion we've all heard of. And this thing spreads and becomes actually quite influential. And eventually it influences a guy called Mani, who was raised in this religion. And then eventually he leaves to form his own religion. But then you'll start to find that there's a religion called Islam that copies many of the ideas from this religion that starts in Persia, of all places. It might be interesting, worth discussing, going through some of the oddities. And also the overlap with the Jewish legends. With old Jewish legends is also really fascinating. So it might be interesting to discuss this in some depth.
Yeah, not to mention the Mormon legacy, Mormonism, which is exactly the same pattern.
Yeah, exactly. So this is called the Book of Al-Chasai, it goes under various names, but Al-Chasai is the most common. I've dug into this at length, and then also we can look at if you look at the legends of the Jews, right? And then you see how they've taken a lot of these legendary aspects, especially the Talmudic, the Kabbalistic ideas, and translated that into Islam. And these are lesser known and lesser discussed aspects of Islam, but they're legitimate parts of Islam that Muslims just want to shy away from, just like they don't want to talk about their historians and their major scholars and the absolute historical garbage that they've written. And this gives us a lot of insight into pre-Islamic influences that are clearly apparent in Islam. But they've clearly glommed onto the Abrahamic quote unquote aspect while trying to downplay all of these pagan and Gnostic aspects.
Okay. Why not? We'll see.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this was great. Odon, fantastic. Really fantastic work. Honestly, it is. I hope Dan Gibson can join us at some point. We can start to maybe discuss with him some of the archaeology and some of what, he's coming up with some new stuff. He's putting out some new material, I believe. And it would be interesting to share perspectives and see if he is open to listening to some of our things and us to learn about him, because he clearly opened the door. People have disagreed for whatever reasons, but I like what he did.
Our friend Mel, he already had him on his channel a few years ago. And he's a very, very nice guy, open to discussion and so on. So we'll see.
Let's hope so. I've emailed him, so let's hope. Otherwise, I'll ask Mel to maybe. Also, by the way, I asked Mel if he could come on. Maybe no camera, no attribution. That might work, because Mel's laying low at the moment. So let's see. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Last word from me then. So Paul and JC, last words from you, and then we convene next time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's you've proved it. The prosecution has rested its case. And I don't think there's any evidence from the defence that's going to come along and change it. So absolutely well done, Odon. If there is an answer, if there's anybody out there who can say that we've got it all wrong and can explain where Safa and Marwa come from, and why the house of God, why God had 2 houses, or why God moved house. If someone's got an explanation, let them bring it on. But as far as I'm concerned, Odin, you've absolutely nailed it. So well done. It's been a great pleasure chatting with you all.
Pleasure was mine.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. Very, very well done, Odon. And I look forward to keep exploring or rather showing to Muslims what happens with the narrative once we actually delve into it and we show them that it is just a fabrication. Hopefully, like this, we will get to more and more answers and help more and more of them. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. The series have been great, and it's always lovely speaking with you, gentlemen.
All right.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Good night. God bless everyone. Take care. Bye.
Okay.